The thought process may seem easy, but the modern lifestyle, with its focus on distraction, makes it difficult to focus on anything. However, if a person is not able to collect their mind and control their thoughts, the lack of focus on a single subject gives them a feeling of overwhelm, and they are unable to achieve real results in any area of life. Of course, in the information age we live in, the abundance of information makes confusion and therefore thoughtlessness inevitable. So we need to be able to control our thoughts, to stay on target, to be able to control our thoughts. This is called grace. That is, people pay attention to something they care about. As our efforts are focused on knowing ourselves and discovering our desires, the ambient noise is attenuated and one ensures oneself against other people's opinions, rumors, unnecessary information flow. At the same time, by focusing all one's energy on one goal, one gets an effective result. Usually when we face a problem, we look for a solution. But the solution depends on our thinking. Just by thinking, we can untie the knots in our lives and avoid the difficulties that await us in the future. Unfortunately, we don't pay much attention to it because thinking seems like such a simple and effortless process. Nevertheless, thinking is our source of power, our means of mastering ourselves and our lives. Only those who can direct their thoughts can be considered powerful. When we lose this common sense, our thinking weakens. We succumb to emotions. We make wrong decisions ourselves. We lose our common sense. We become dependent on the environment and the opinions of others. So if we are worried about our present circumstances, we have to start controlling our thoughts. On the contrary, it is as if the whole world has joined hands in a race to distract and steal our thoughts. Everywhere we look, our minds are distracted. Smartphones, televisions, social networks, catchy headlines, dazzling advertisements, movies with special effects, deafening music, entertainment centers, TV series and shows that are almost as addictive as drugs, game shows, even light literature for those who want to look a little stylish. Controlling your thoughts and focusing your willpower on these busy and noisy roads is a real feat. The tragic thing is that sometimes we take it for granted and normal to lose our ability to think, to forget ourselves. So first of all, we need to be able to value ourselves and our thoughts and not behave like a child who turns to every voice. If we don't want to be controlled from the outside, we must not lose our thinking and focus. As Imam Sadiq said, the root of every calamity is heedlessness, and the root of every happiness is dhikr. But what does it mean to be oblivious? The manipulation of others is the control of what we think and how we think. Zikr is the opposite, to think freely about whatever you want, whenever you want, on whatever subject you want, i.e. to hold the thought in your hands. The way out, of course, is not to give up on technology and get back into a corner. First of all, if we are concerned about our current situation, then we want to understand it. We want to have a deeper perspective because we are not satisfied with the luxurious reality that is unfolding before our eyes. So our existence is not only superficial, but also has deep layers. Secondly, the reality we live in has both pleasant and unpleasant aspects. When we focus our attention only on the pleasant side, we fail to see the flaws in the unpleasant side. Therefore, our thinking should be as deep as it is broad. We should try to understand reality as it is and avoid fantasies. Third, if what worries us is that our desires remain unanswered, we need to become aware of our desires and get to the root of them. Modern man, as Jung said, is not a man living in the present, but a man who has made a decision at the edge of the world in terms of mentality. He looks at the past from a lofty point, but the future is for him an endless, mysterious abyss. To reach this summit, to understand the past and take risks for the future requires awareness, understanding, and courage. Other important factors influencing our thinking are our tendencies and desires. They are also quite different, weak and strong, for our benefit and for our detriment, etc. Our thinking power depends on these desires, but it can also make them dependent on itself. In other words, sometimes our desires and emotions determine what we think and how we think, and sometimes our thinking power determines what we want and how we want it. This gives us great privileges. Without suffering, we can always revise and change our priorities in life, our perspective on life, the way we solve problems, just by thinking. There is a direct relationship between thought and desire. What we think about, we want more of, and vice versa. As long as we don't think about it, the desire disappears. It is the power of thought that has the power to change ourselves and our situation. That is why it is so important to control thought, not only as insurance against external influences, but also for inner empowerment and strengthening of the will. Someone may object that one cannot control one's thoughts because of the intensity of some desire. Everyone can have such a desire. There is no need to worry about it. You should start by controlling the weaker desires with thought, and you can save the stronger desires for later. For example, we can strengthen a weak desire that is good for us by thinking a lot about it, or we can destroy weak desires that are bad for us by forgetting about them. Let's say a person wants to take a vacation abroad this year but can't afford it. If he does not think about it, if he does not participate in conversations, this desire will gradually disappear and it will be possible to focus on more useful matters. If one constantly thinks about this desire, if one feeds it too much, then it will grow stronger and become bitter because it is not reciprocated. It will arouse jealousy towards others. It will lead to unnecessary conflicts, and it will distract one from what is considered useful. As you gain experience and find the power of thought, you can move on to more intense desires. This is where we must begin to control and govern ourselves. One of the main nutrients of thought is information, because the information we receive affects our thinking and determines its direction. We should therefore be sensitive to the food we eat. Just as we do not accept food that tastes bad, is poisonous, or smells bad, we should also pay attention to the nourishment of our thoughts. We should not be interested in the attractiveness of information, but in its usefulness and its effect on thought. For example, going into other people's private lives, listening to gossip and slander does us no good and distracts us from ourselves and our own lives, which harms us. Focusing on dirty doormats that do not benefit our personality and the environment we live in distracts us from the important aspect, and we forget our usefulness. Let's not forget that the power of thought shapes our perspective, our expectations, our general mood, and determines our decisions and behavior. More important than the form of our action is its content, the ideas hidden behind it. It is better to take stock of one's own situation at the end of each day. What did I do? Why did I do it? What was my intention? There is no need to avoid self-criticism. On the contrary, we need to see our weaknesses so that we can move forward. Thinking is an integral part of a human being, perhaps its main pillar. It is only through thinking that it is possible to transcend the boundaries of a limited world, to rise high and see the big picture, or to descend to the ground and get to the details. Thinking reveals our infinite talents. Once we have identified the initial targets of our thinking, how we are and how we want to be, we can attack with full courage. Neither stereotypes imposed by public opinion, nor religious dogmas, nor other norms should stop us. Limiting thought is an unforgivable crime against oneself. Let us not be afraid of ourselves. Let us not make a mockery of our dreams. Let us give complete freedom to our thoughts and see what we want. What desire can we satisfy? What goal can we tell ourselves to stop when we reach it? Believe me, if we honestly confess our desires to ourselves, we come to this conclusion. We want the infinity of everything. We are attracted to everything that exists, but we are not satisfied with nothingness and limitation. Why do we fear death? We know it is the end. Why do we dislike sickness, poverty, weakness, and ignorance? Because they are all limitations. Why are we not satisfied when we achieve a dream and wish for more? Not because we are greedy, but because we long for eternity. So in the present situation, we are interested in limitations and imperfections, and what we desire is limitlessness and infinity. So we crave the pleasure of gain and avoid the pain of loss. If life is enjoyable by achieving dreams, we should say that we are all hostages to our dreams. So if we cannot control our desires, others will control our desires. He who does not own his inclinations has his will in someone else's hands. Much has been said on this subject, which we have touched upon before, and even today you can find countless examples around. The will weakens, the thought fades, the desires become confused. And such a being is given the pretense of some kind of freedom. A person who sees the desires and pleasures imposed on him as his own, who thinks he is making a free choice, actually loses control over himself. Fashion determines what and how we choose, use, wear, eat, read, and shape us. Everyone wants to keep up with fashion, and even those who do not want to follow mainstream fashion are offered alternative fashions. Some thinkers have described this way of life in sharp terms, calling it slavery and serfdom, which dominate the world in a new and humanist way. If we don't know ourselves and the laws of life, this will continue. So the way out of this situation is to learn science. Knowledge is the food of our thinking, and even if we go deeper, we can liken life to a path of knowledge. As we live, we learn, gain experience, and therefore increase our knowledge. If desires and tendencies are understood, if opportunities are seized correctly, our living conditions will change in a positive way. When you control your desires, knowledge increases, your approach to life changes, and life unfolds in a different, new space. Life is like a book. As one controls one's desires, new discoveries are made. Even achieving dreams is not that important in this regard, because the process itself gives us something. Life increases and deepens one's knowledge through its ups and downs. The question is, what does one live to understand in the end? Of course, some everyday truths are not worth living to understand. For example, why live a lifetime to understand that life is short or that health is important? It is a pity to spend a lifetime trying to understand these truths. Even the inexperienced can understand this. Self-knowledge and self-reflection, that is, examining desires, searching for their sources, identifying the purpose, is a unique human advantage. When we look deeply into our inner world, we will see that we are a magnificent, complex, and infinitely mysterious world. The way of life should lead one to the secrets of life. One can discover these secrets not by reading or hearing about them, but by living life exactly as it should be lived. As Hazrat Ali said about the sending of the prophets, they came to reveal the inner treasures of the mind. Knowledge is of two kinds, internal and external. They can be called differently, mental and experiential, a priori and a posteriori, axiom and non-axiom, etc. Let's leave the terminology to philosophers. We need to know that man is not born as an empty vessel. There is such a deep treasure inside us that the knowledge we learn from the environment, our lives, our reflections reveal it. Rather, our living should reveal that treasure and remove the obstacles on the way. Because every step we take can both strengthen and destroy the barriers to the emergence of our different talents. Knowing and learning is a basic human need. Ignorance is unbearable for him. He wants to know everything right. That is why darkness frightens us and uncertainty disturbs us. We want to see where we are going, where we are, and when we can't, we panic or lose the will to move. The familiar ways bore us. When there is no novelty in our lives, we get bored because we are not interested in the known. Our need to learn is manifested in our desire to discover mysteries. There is a strange opposition in us. We don't like ignorance, and we are not interested in what we know. We like to solve puzzles, to face new questions. We enjoy discovery. When our days are similar to each other, when today is a repetition of yesterday, our love for life dies. Because in such a routine, there is no room for mysteries and discoveries. When life is boring, even the smallest and most insignificant innovation becomes a major event. For example, the release of a new model of a phone or a new series of a series becomes a global event. Thousands of people are waiting for this innovation. In fact, one should explore oneself with this passion, live one's life with this interest, look forward to every day with this excitement. When he doesn't do this, he turns to external forces and seeks support for himself and his life. Man tries to fulfill his need for new sensations and new discoveries, which he cannot get from real life through such artificial means. Those who are not fans of cereal and new phones try to meet this demand by constantly traveling around the world, continuing their education and other substitutes. Because life will be boring and unbearable if it is not spent in search of new emotions and new knowledge. But is all this determined to meet our needs? No. In fact, the number of pleasures we get from materialism is limited, and sooner or later we find it repetitive, get used to it, and lose interest in it. Expanding our interest does not change anything. The quantity of objects we enjoy does not affect the quality of the pleasure we get. So we can meet our need to renew life and avoid repetition in our lives by going deeper. In order to adapt to new and deeper emotions, we must first get to know ourselves, not the environment. The center of production of these new emotions is not in the world around us, but within us. The deeper one gets to know oneself, the more one enjoys life. Let's take a simple example. For a child to experience the joy of parenthood, he or she must grow up to master parenting skills and become a parent. These cannot be acquired by reading, observing, or hearing. In the Hadiths, a person who does not acquire new knowledge, who does not progress, who does not develop new skills, is called Malun. This is not an insult, it is the state of that person. So if life is not like that, it is not life. That's what life is for, so that day by day our vitality increases, our potential is realized, poverty decreases. There is no need to look for anything outside. Everything is inside our chests. We just need to bring it out. Every new discovery, every new understanding, every new realization is a new joy. Since life is not a purely biological process, pleasures should not be limited to our physiology, but should encompass all layers of existence.